It's entirely possible I rely too much on my first impression of a game to inform my overall opinion, but, well, I do it anyway. I'd love to say I give every game I play a solid hour of my time before I make up my mind on how I feel about it and whether I'd like to play more, but I also rather enjoy not lying to myself all the time, so it's probably worth mentioning that on occasion I don't even make it past the main menu. If the menu is confusing, if the title music is terrible, or if the game style on display is just too bland, I will occasionally just nope right out of there before I even start the game. Simply put, I don't have time to waste on games that can't even be bothered to throw together a good first impression. So this video right here is actually pretty momentous. See, I love me some Diablo. I have spent literally countless hours playing Diablos 2 and 3, and because this is the world we live in now, I want to clarify that when I said literally just now, I meant it literally. I've had D2 installed on like 7 different computers under 4 or 5 different accounts from 2 different battle chests and eventually via their digital key redeeming service. I don't even know where to start in tracking down the actual metrics for that time, but based on my own feverish recollections of late nights spent hurling direwolves at Mephisto, I would hazard a guess toward my total time spent playing the various incarnations of Diablo being in the ballpark of a couple thousand hours. So when I downloaded the open beta of Diablo 4 to give it a try, you've got to understand that this wasn't Blizzard trying to make a good first impression to sell me a few months of entertainment. This was Blizzard making an attempt at defining the next epoch of my life. If this went well, this would be Blizzard cementing their game as the first and frequently only place I would turn to take out my digital frustrations for possibly the next decade. So let's talk about my first impressions of Diablo 4 then, shall we? Initial signs were good. The menu music and design hit all the right Diablo notes for me, and the class select step of character creation that has all the available classes sitting there around a fire a la Diablo 2 was just perfect. The atmosphere established by the opening cinematic, which served as the announcement trailer 3 years ago, is still immaculate despite my familiarity with it. There were no major missteps right off the bat, and at least for the PC beta, I didn't have to wait in any lengthy queues to get signed in. So far, so good. My first hurdle, though, was the new character customization. Now, don't get me wrong, I love me a good character creator. Divinity Original Sin 2 offered up these 6 outstanding pre-generated characters that were fully voiced and had incredible backstories, but I still spent the first 40 minutes of that game building out a custom character. If an RPG gives me the option to customize my character, I will waste an absurd amount of time there. Even Saints Row 3, which I turned out to like for plenty of reasons, probably would not have hooked me if it hadn't been for the perfection that is their character creator. Heck, the latest Saints Row game isn't even on my radar to play. It just looked too bland as a follow-up to Saints Row 4, and despite that, I downloaded the free trial of the game's character creator and spent an hour fiddling around with the dials. Given all that, I was initially thrilled to be able to customize my new Necromancer, right up until I clicked Finish, waited for the loading screen to pass, and then realized that with custom characters comes the evergreen pitfall of gamers wanting to see their custom characters rendered into the cinematics. Diablo 4 starts off with a cinematic of your freshly built character stumbling through a storm and losing a horse like a chump, all rendered real-time in the game engine. And if this were any other game than a Blizzard game, I probably wouldn't care that much, but I'm not sure if you're aware of Blizzard's track record with game cinematics. It's amazing. It's no exaggeration to say that more than any actual gameplay stimulation or boss-beating catharsis, the thing that dragged me over my first playthrough of Diablo 2 was the promise of getting to the next cinematic at the end of each act. I wasn't sold on StarCraft until I watched the opening cinematic, and I wasn't sold on Heart of the Swarm costing me another $40 until I watched Kerrigan's hordes down a battlecruiser over the skyline of Korhal. Suffice it to say, for whatever reason, Blizzard has never sold me on a game simply by announcing it and describing it. Maybe that's because when all you do is describe them, their games are all super derivative. Diablo was just angry D&D, StarCraft and Warcraft are literally just Command and Conquer except Warhammer themed, WoW is Warcraft Diablo, and Hearthstone is Warcraft Magic the Gathering. Honestly, the most original gameplay concept that ever came from a Blizzard title was a community mod for Warcraft 3 called Defense of the Ancients, which you may know better as Dota. Of course, Valve yoinked that and spun the mode off into an industry-redefining phenomenon that Blizzard then copied, thus Heroes of the Storm. And speaking of copying Valve, Overwatch is basically Team Fortress 2. Now to be clear, I'm not saying these games aren't amazing. Blizzard may not break new gameplay ground, ever, but they bring to the table a wealth of experience with crafting game settings and polishing game mechanics into a glistening sheen. Their games are, in general, the best examples of whatever genre they're in, regardless of whether they were the first ones there. But my point is that Blizzard has never won me over with the concept of a game. They win me over with that first cinematic, that first chance I have to see this brilliant setting they've crafted displayed in a spotlessly polished short film. Those first moments with my character in Diablo 4, however, were not spotlessly polished. Due to server load and the beta-ish nature of the game, I'm assuming, there were a number of lag spikes that marred the moment, but even setting that aside, Diablo 4 is built in an evolution of the game engine that powered Diablo 3, which was itself an extension of the gameplay established in Diablo 2 and 1. That engine is optimized for top-down isometric third-person action RPG gameplay, not for character close-ups the way you might see in something like The Last of Us. And compared to the opening cinematic, the first moment in the game itself was a bummer. I did hope that perhaps this was something they would only be doing for scenes that actually had my character in them, that Blizzard was essentially just taking some of the conversations we had in previous games and using the admittedly much more detailed engine of Diablo 4 to insert the player more naturally into them. And while that is something I could get behind, there was one cinematic in the demo that didn't have my character in it. It was a vision, a flashback my character had to something that happened weeks ago, and it was ripe for a pre-rendered cinematic. But there wasn't one. Instead, I got an in-engine cinematic featuring close-ups on NPC faces just detailed enough to make all of their facial animations look incredibly dated. Not a good look for your new game, Blizzard. Of course, now that I'm done ranting about that, we can get down to the meat of my first impressions, which are that, in general, Diablo 4 seems like a really good Diablo game. They're not breaking any new ground here, of course, as has been established, Blizzard rarely does, but this is dark fantasy action role-playing in exactly the vein that I would like from the Diablo franchise, with a healthy dose of refinements versus the last entry. The skill tree feels massive in the same way that it did in Diablo 3, but it's laid out in a way that makes it relatively straightforward to determine your build and pair your upgrades accordingly. Where Diablo 2's skill trees were easy to read but not terribly deep, and Diablo 3's skill trees were fathomlessly deep but required you to read a short novel in order to figure out which skills would synergize well, Diablo 4 seems to have brought together the best of both of those worlds. The overall setting detail is excellent as well, with great sound design and satisfying, if familiar, combat and enemy designs, and despite my initial trepidation regarding Blizzard's announcement of a seasonal battle pass for Diablo 4, they didn't take away my ability to customize the appearance of my gear to match the appearance of any other gear I've picked up thus far. I was really worried they were going to lock that sort of customization behind a paywall, but as of right now it looks like that'll just be base game functionality, which is nice. That means the Battle Pass will probably be limited to just the same sort of content you got in the free seasonal updates to Diablo 3, I suppose, and while I won't say that doesn't suck, I also never actually played towards the seasonal stuff in Diablo 3, so while that may kind of bite for you, it wouldn't really affect the way I play the game at all. After the demo period was over, though, I didn't immediately pre-order the game. It was good, I had fun, and I'm excited about it, but I wasn't blown away like I'd hoped to be. They got me close, to be sure, and it's entirely possible that a good cinematic in there might have genuinely done me in. I have weird priorities. But as it is, I'll probably wait to see exactly what this Battle Pass entails before I pull the trigger. The game is certainly worth watching, and my first impression was positive. Just maybe not as overwhelmingly positive as it could have been.